Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly through muddy alleys, shadowed cloisters, and creaky castle corridors as we uncover the frankly terrible job description of the medieval assassin. There's no sleek black outfit, no cool theme music, and definitely no dental plan. Just you, a rusty dagger, and a lingering sense of dread. You've been hired to take out someone important. Who? Honestly, you weren't paying full attention. The tavern was loud and the wine was free. All you know is there's coin involved and travel expenses are not covered. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Statistically speaking, assassins in this era had all the longevity of a mayfly at a bonfire. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and the local time you're drifting off. I love seeing where in the world we're all quietly learning about obscure, miserable jobs from the past. You're standing in a half-flooded cellar adjusting your makeshift belt. It holds a tiny dagger, a hollowed-out quill full of suspicious liquid, and what might be a very dead mouse you were planning to use for distraction. This is your kit. This is your life. Welcome to the job. Being an assassin sounds glamorous, until you realize it involves long periods of damp waiting, intense anxiety about stabbing the wrong person, and the constant risk of being tortured for someone else's grudge. You're not part of a sleek order of elite killers. You're more like a struggling gig worker in a feudal economy, taking murder contracts from whispery monks, corrupt knights, and occasionally the jealous spouse of a merchant who may or may not be overreacting. Your resume doesn't matter. No one checks your references. All that matters is that you're quiet, quick, and willing to carry out tasks most people won't even whisper about during Lent. And let's be honest, most assassins were chosen because they were desperate, expendable, and not terribly missed. If they disappeared, mainstream history tends to romanticize these figures. The noble assassin trope, popular in movies and video games, paints them as slick shadow dwellers with philosophical motives. Reality check? You're basically a disposable pawn. The job doesn't come with glory, it comes with blisters. What's on your daily checklist? You rise early, usually because sleeping in a hayloft with fleas is incompatible with rest. You take stock of your tools, mostly things you had to scavenge, trade for, or steal. Maybe a sharpened spoon, a bottle of sleeping elixir, made from something that might be belladonna. If you're lucky, you have shoes that match. You don't have armor. It's too noisy. You don't have backup. You are the backup. And your pay? If it even arrives, it comes in the form of copper coins, a half-rotten chicken, or a promise that someone will owe you a favor, which in medieval terms could mean anything from a sack of flour to not turning you in. As for job security, let's just say your employer might kill you before the mission to keep things quiet. That's not paranoia. That's just statistics. One account from 14th century Florence details a failed assassination where the hitman was given incorrect directions, stabbed a decoy, and was summarily drowned in a fountain for dishonor. That's a pretty common ending, and it wasn't a fancy fountain either, just a muddy hole with frogs. Quirky fringe fact? Some contracts specified that the assassin should appear as if by divine punishment, which meant dressing like a ghost or demon. Imagine creeping into a noble's bedchamber in a homemade skeleton costume while trying not to step on a squeaky rush mat. Spooky, yes. Stealthy? Not quite. Historians still argue whether some of these assassins were truly independent or operated under secret orders from guilds, mercenary bands, or even the church. The line between hired blade and political tool was often as blurry as your vision after drinking pond water for hydration. What did medieval people think of you? Most never even realized you existed. The educated class might whisper about dark men from the east or agents of vengeance, but to the average peasant, assassins were stories told to frighten children into not wandering off. Behave, or the silent man with the crooked teeth will get you. You, of course, do have crooked teeth. It's hard to find a good dentist when your job requires disappearing for weeks at a time. And dental hygiene in general is an afterthought. But that's a minor complaint when compared to your main problem, staying alive long enough to get paid. It's not just the danger of getting caught. It's the loneliness, the hunger, the constant pretending. You can't tell anyone what you do. You can't trust your employer. And when you walk into a town, all you see are escape routes, potential threats, and the vague hope that this time, maybe, you won't have to crawl through a privy tunnel. Spoiler, you will. Still, you keep going, because what else is there? Farming is back-breaking, monastic life is boring, and your face is on enough wanted posters, red carved wood blocks, and whispered tavern gossip that it's safer to keep moving. So you gather your things, adjust your itchy hood, and step back into the night. It's raining. Of course it is. It's always raining, and you've got a long road ahead to meet your next contact. Someone you've never met, whose face you've never seen, and who might try to kill you just for showing up late. The road to becoming an assassin isn't paved. It's muddy, filled with thorny hedgerows, and it frequently smells of turnips. But before you're even on that road, someone has to hire you, and that, oddly enough, is one of the more ridiculous parts of the whole affair. You'd think this would be a secretive, high-level meeting, perhaps conducted in whispers behind a curtain. Instead, your first contract is often handed down in a chicken-stuffed tavern corner by someone whose cloak smells suspiciously like fish. Welcome to medieval networking. Your client could be anyone. Sometimes it's a jealous noble with a vendetta because someone stole their falcon trainer. Other times, it's a monk. Yes, a monk. Don't let the shaved heads and quiet psalm-singing fool you. Monastic politics could be as cutthroat as any royal court. Abbot Jerome didn't just lose the scriptorium key. Someone made sure it was permanently misplaced, along with Brother Felix. Monks, for all their vows, were often landowners, tax collectors, and silent power brokers. And when their prayers for divine retribution went unanswered, they occasionally turned to you. A silent man with a blade is sometimes just faster than divine justice. The Lord moves in mysterious ways, but you're already in the rafters with a crossbow. Still, not every client is so composed. Many are emotional wrecks with sweaty palms and unclear instructions. Make it look like an accident, they say, while handing you a map that's upside down and smells like wine. One knight once asked you to deliver vengeance upon his rival, preferably in a poetic fashion. You're not sure what that meant. You ended up pushing the man into a vat of honey during a feast. It was sticky, but not exactly Shakespearean. Payment negotiations are equally nerve-wracking. You want silver. They want to pay you in salt, goats, or dubious promises. The earl will reward you generously, they say, forgetting that most earls are stingier than a rat in winter. You've learned to haggle ruthlessly, or at least try to. Last time, You were given half a wheel of cheese and a cloak that once belonged to a bishop. Spoiler, it did not. Sometimes the client is so vague you have to do your own research. Who is this target? Where do they live? What do they look like? Are they allergic to walnuts by chance? If you're lucky, you'll be told he has a scar on his left cheek and smells like lavender. Great. That only narrows it down to about half the population of the castle. There's no LinkedIn profile, no headshots. You rely on gossip, bribery, and guesswork. One assassin from Burgundy reportedly took out the wrong brother, which caused a small war and several very awkward family dinners. Historians still argue whether assassins were employed more often by the church or by regional lords. Some suggest a semi-formal structure, something between a freelance guild and a traveling menace for hire. Others think it was pure chaos, lonely operators recruited by whoever was most desperate. The truth is likely somewhere in the itchy, muddy middle. There's a fringe belief among scholars that some monastic groups kept coded ledgers of divine intercessions, which might have been euphemisms for hired hits. The phrase, "he met his heavenly path prematurely," appears in several suspicious entries from a Bavarian abbey. Did they mean a sudden death? Or that Brother Anselm just tripped on a rake? No one knows for sure. One thing's for certain, contracts were not formal. You never signed anything. You didn't want a paper trail. The closest thing to a written agreement was sometimes a token, perhaps a ring, a carved bone, or an icon, something small and oddly sentimental that signaled you were approved. You carry these tokens carefully. One slip, one dropped amulet at the wrong moment, and you've just outed yourself to a town full of people who think assassins are devil-worshipping baby snatchers. They're wrong about the devil part, but still, you'd rather not explain the nuance while fleeing pitchforks. There's no trial run, no apprenticeship. You're just thrown into the mess. It's possible the person hiring you also once was an assassin and now has too many creaky knees to do the job themselves. That's not comforting. And your employers are rarely consistent. Today's ally might be tomorrow's target. Loyalty is flexible. A count might contract you to eliminate a rival, and then that rival's cousin finds out and doubles the price to turn the job around on your original boss. Congratulations! You're now part of a medieval murder-love triangle. You've learned not to get attached. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is don't assume anything is over until you're 10 leagues away and your name isn't on anyone's to-be-stabbed list. In some cases, noble families used intermediaries, go-betweens who specialized in secrecy. These shadowy brokers might meet you in a bakery, ask for 2 loaves of rye, and then slide a target's name across in a pouch of flour. It's weird. It's awkward. But it works. Most of the time. You've come to recognize these types. Their cloaks are too clean, their boots too unscuffed, and they never quite meet your eye. Once, a woman handed you a rolled parchment inside a roast goose. You don't ask questions anymore. By now, you're probably wondering, why keep doing this? Well, it's not for the prestige. It's because the world outside offers even fewer options. You can toil in a field for 15 hours a day and still starve. Or you can roll the dice and risk your life for a handful of coin and a rotten cloak with a hole in it. And who knows, maybe this time the contract will be simple. Just sneak into a manor, hide behind a tapestry, and wait. Maybe the guard will fall asleep. Maybe the dog won't bark. Maybe, just maybe, this time you won't have to climb out of a latrine chute at midnight. You try to believe that, because belief is all that keeps you going some nights. So you've agreed to the job. Someone's got to die quietly, and you're the lucky soul holding the dagger. But here's the awkward bit. You actually don't know how to kill people. Not well, anyway. At least, not in the way that looks smooth or subtle. That means it's time for research. And your research lab is a damp barn that smells aggressively of chickens and despair. Assassination isn't just about stabbing. Anyone can stab. The trick is doing it right, silent, swift, undetected, and if possible, with something that doesn't result in you getting blood all over your one decent tunic. That's where poison comes in. Poison is the lazy assassin's best friend, except you're not lazy. You're just tired of getting tackled by guards. But learning poison in the 14th century isn't like flipping through a NOS-indexed field guide. You're studying scraps of notes passed along by herbalists, half-remembered rhymes muttered by suspicious grandmothers, and trial-and-error experiments that occasionally result in you seeing stars for 2 days straight. Your library is 3 cracked scrolls, a stolen alchemist's notebook written mostly in bad Latin, and a basket of weird herbs you're not entirely sure aren't just salad. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins had reliable access to potent poisons or were simply improvising with whatever looks suspiciously vibrant in the forest. You're working with nightshade, belladonna, hemlock, monkshood, and something you were told was dragon's breath, but turned out to be moldy turnip pulp. You test things on insects first, then mice. Sometimes a goat. Once, your cloak. The results are mixed. One time, you thought you'd perfected a sleeping draft, until your target drank it, passed out, then woke up 5 minutes later singing tavern songs. Not ideal. And poisons aren't just a matter of potency, it's also about delivery. Bread crust? Easy to plant but noticeable. Wine? Perfect. If you can get near the goblet. Apples? Symbolic, yes. Practical, not so much. You're constantly wrestling with how to sneak your concoctions into food without accidentally poisoning the cook, yourself, or a very persistent cat. You learn to mix things in oil, to smear substances on weapon tips, to hide tiny pellets under fingernails. The more paranoid your target, the trickier it becomes. Some nobles hired official food testers, which meant your poison had to either work slowly or not at all. Some fringe methods included rubbing poison onto clothing. One historical account from Lombardy described an attempted assassination where a woman allegedly soaked her rival's veil in death wine. Did it work? No. It just made the veil smell weird and the target sneeze for a week. Still, A for effort. Your lab setup is primitive. A cracked cauldron over a smoky fire, wooden spoons, mortar and pestle made from what you hope is stone. You sneeze constantly, not sure if it's the powdered aconite or just allergies. There's no ventilation. Occasionally, a goat watches you with judgmental eyes. Once, you tried to dry some herbs using a low fire, only to end up with a small blaze that nearly took the barn. And your eyebrows. That was a fun Tuesday. Safety protocols? You wish. You tie a strip of cloth around your mouth, which does almost nothing, and try to remember which bottles are bad. The labels are smudged. You're pretty sure blue means sleep, but then again, it might mean death. You take your chances. It's all incredibly tedious. Long hours of mixing, testing, documenting in messy shorthand. No one talks about the lonely part of this job. While other tradesmen get to chat in market squares or argue over bread prices, you sit alone stirring a bubbling pot that smells like wet bark and foot. You haven't bathed in days. Your fingers are stained green. Your hair's got burrs in it, and your only companion is a spider who's taken up residence on the shelf, labeled definitely not arsenic. You're 90% sure that's a joke you wrote to yourself, and 10% worried you've forgotten what's actually in the jar. Still, some nights, when the moonlight hits your table just right, you feel oddly content. You're crafting something, creating a strange art form with fatal consequences. In a weird way, it's peaceful, until you realize the batch you're working on smells like roasted almonds, which is never, ever good. To be an assassin in this world, you need to know more than just how to kill. You need to understand how things rot, how bodies fail, how panic smells different from fear. You spend hours learning the signs of internal collapse, pupils dilating, sweating spasms. Your goal is quiet, not spectacle. Sometimes you test on yourself. Just a tiny dose. Enough to make your vision go a little sideways, your thoughts fog. This is a bad idea. But when you're the only one you can trust, you're also your best guinea pig. You keep notes, crude drawings, symbols that only you can decipher. You hide them inside hollowed-out bricks, buried under the floorboards of abandoned chapels, or stuffed inside a broken pew near the back of a cathedral. If someone found them, they'd think you were cursed, or worse, literate. Some days you wonder if all this effort is worth it. Couldn't you just hit someone with a rock and run? Probably, but you got a reputation to build. You want people whispering about the man who makes people fall asleep forever, or at least the one who never misses, eventually. You're not some legendary figure. You're a slightly hungry person with dangerous hobbies and a mild fear of boiling things unattended. But you're learning, slowly, messily, and by candlelight, which gives everything a slightly heroic glow if you squint. So you keep at it, stirring, grinding, measuring with your fingers, and hoping that the next batch won't explode or cause immediate projectile vomiting. One day, perhaps, your poisons will be the stuff of whispered legend. For now, they're just a very smelly step on your long, crooked path to silent, hopefully profitable murder. Your poison is packed. It smells like regret and bitter almonds, and you're 80% sure it won't melt through the pouch this time. Now comes the second most unpleasant part of the job, moving. Because in the medieval world, getting from point A, your reeking barn lab, to point B, your soon-to-be-deceased target, is less epic journey and more slow trudge through damp chaos. Forget about sleek black horses or mysterious cloaks fluttering in the moonlight. You're on foot. Always. Because assassins don't exactly own carriages. And if you're lucky enough to hitch a ride in a cart, you're likely squashed between a barrel of pickled eels and an old woman who insists on humming off-key psalms for 8 hours straight. You don't get to pick the weather either. It's raining again. Cold, steady drizzle that soaks through every layer of your mismatched outfit. The road is more mud than earth, and every step threatens to suck the shoe off your foot. You consider walking barefoot for half a minute before remembering all the charming diseases lurking in puddles. Your pack clinks softly with tools and poisons you've carefully wrapped in cloth. Cloth that used to be a monk's undershirt. Not ideal, but the budget is what it is. There's something uniquely demoralizing about long-distance medieval travel. The distances aren't actually that far. You're not crossing continents, but each mile feels eternal. Roads are little more than suggestions, and trail markers were often stolen to make someone's chicken coop more festive. You pass fields where peasants glance up, suspicious. You don't look like a pilgrim. You don't smell like a pilgrim, but you mutter, "Holy bones of St. Percival," under your breath and keep moving, trying to look pious rather than homicidal. When night falls, there are two options. Sleep outdoors with the badgers or take your chances at a roadside inn. The inn seems like the better bet until you open the door and are hit by the triple assault of smoke, boiled onions, and someone playing a very enthusiastic but poorly tuned lute. Inns are dangerous, full of wandering eyes, drunk guards, and local gossip hounds who know when someone's face is unfamiliar. You adopt a story. You're a tinker, or a monk, or a widow's nephew on your way to deliver wool. You try not to use the same cover twice in one region. In a pinch, you fall back on your personal favorite, mute traveler with a vow of silence. It saves you from talking too much, and most people are weirdly respectful once they think you're spiritually afflicted. One time, you made the mistake of pretending to be a barber surgeon. You were promptly asked to drain someone's leg boil. You've never run faster. Sleeping at an inn is rarely restful. You keep one eye open, your back aches from straw-stuffed bedding that's home to a dozen generations of fleas. You sleep with your dagger pressed against your thigh and your pouch of poison tucked under your shirt. And in the morning, you eat whatever stale bread and suspicious ale the innkeeper provides, thanking fate when the rats didn't get to it first. Historians still argue whether traveling assassins blended well into the general population. Some claim they used common pilgrimage routes as cover, mingling with the crowds moving toward shrines and relics. Others believe they kept to the woods and lesser-known paths, becoming almost ghost-like presences between villages. The truth is likely a messy mix. You do both. When the heat's too high in town, you veer off into the woods, relying on old charcoal markings scratched into trees, signs left by others in the trade. A curved line for safety, 3 dots for danger. A fish-shaped carving means food ahead, or sometimes just fish. There's a charm to the forest. It's quieter. The danger's more predictable. Wolves, sure, but they rarely ask probing questions. Bandits are trickier, especially when they mistake you for a wealthy traveler. They're always so disappointed to find you only carry a rusty spoon and a rolled-up sketch of someone's uncle you've been hired to eliminate. You've learned how to travel light. 1 blanket, 1 cloak, 2 small sacks of tools. You carry dried meat, stale bread, and something vaguely green that used to be cheese. Every now and then, a farmer's cart offers you a lift, if you help push it up a hill or share a story. You make one up about a haunted windmill. It buys you 20 miles and a cold turnip. The biggest danger isn't wolves, bandits, or spoiled cheese. It's recognition. Word spreads fast in the medieval world. A face described at the right tavern might be remembered in the next village. That mole above your eyebrow? You've learned to hide it under soot or by smearing sheep dung across your cheeks. Fashionable, no, but effective. And travel isn't just tiring, it's lonely. You pass through towns full of laughing children, arguing bakers, lovers sneaking glances. You feel like a ghost, a shadow slipping through other people's warmth. You leave no trace but your muddy footprints and a slightly unsettling vibe. One night, on the road outside Ghent, you pass a campfire and hear someone singing the lullaby your mother used to hum. You pause, just for a second, but you can't stop. You're on the move, always on the move. Fringe trivia? Some assassins reportedly used forged pilgrimage badges to get free food and housing at abbeys. One clever fellow claimed to have walked barefoot from Santiago de Compostela, carrying a hollow staff filled with poisoned needles. He died choking on a fishbone before using it, but you admire the creativity. And so, with sore feet, growling stomach, and a constant ache behind your left eye, you press on. Your target waits in some drafty tower, unaware that a weary stranger is inching ever closer, smelling faintly of herbs, deception, and about 6 different kinds of mud. You've made it to the town. Congratulations! Your boots are soaked, your cloak is stiff with dirt, and your back has opinions it didn't have yesterday. But now comes the hard part. Blending in long enough to get close. And in a bustling medieval city, that's both easier and somehow 10 times harder than you'd think. The good news? No one knows who you are. The bad news? They'll want to know. Everyone's nosy in a town where entertainment mostly involves watching pigs fight in the street or guessing who the baker is secretly courting. An unfamiliar face is as subtle as a screaming goose in a cathedral. The streets are narrow, muddy, packed with carts, dogs, children, and smells that could peel paint off a fresco. Fish guts, tallow smoke, and whatever's wafting from that suspicious bucket outside the tavern. It's chaos, and the perfect place to disappear, assuming you don't gag first. You wrap your cloak tighter, duck your head, and adopt the city pace. Brisk, determined, slightly angry, you find a place to stay, not an inn this time, too risky, but a filthy corner in a hayloft behind a baker's shop. You tell him you're passing through. He tells you not to steal anything. It's a deal. Your target lives here somewhere. A petty noble? A merchant lord? A particularly unpopular bishop? The client was vague. You've got a name, a few gossip fragments, and a crude drawing that makes the man look like a turnip with a mustache. So you start listening. Taverns, bathhouses, street vendors, even gossiping washerwomen by the stream. These are your libraries now. Every murmured insult, every careless brag might be the breadcrumb that leads you closer. And thankfully, people in medieval towns love to talk, especially when ale is involved. Did you hear what Sir Adelbert did to his steward? No, but I heard his wife hasn't seen daylight since Lent. Someone said there's a stranger asking about him. Oops, that last one's about you. Time to move. Historians still argue whether assassins favored urban environments or avoided them. Cities offer crowds to vanish into, but also more eyes, more patrols, and more gossip. A small-town rumor spreads faster than a plague rat on a pilgrimage cart. You develop tricks. You buy a fish from the market just to carry it around and look local. You loiter near fountains pretending to pray. You even join a line for confession, more for the camouflage than the absolution. The priest looks at you once, then twice, and decides not to ask why you smell like almond extract and burnt leather. You also learn the alleyways, every shortcut, every crooked door, every set of stairs that creaks one too many times. It's not enough to find your target. You need to plan your exit before you ever step close. One wrong turn, and it's pitchforks and angry mobs, and you explaining, poorly, why you're holding a crossbow in someone's heirloom ring. And in the cities, rats are the least of your concerns. Plague is real and frequent. You've seen more than one target slip through your fingers, not from cleverness, but from death via bad oysters. You've learned not to get too emotionally invested. Still, if you're patient, the city starts to reveal its layers. The way the guards rotate near the merchant's house. How the laundress leaves the kitchen door open on Thursdays. The boy who delivers eggs but often lingers too long near the stables, probably in love. All useful. Fringe detail. In some cities, professional eavesdroppers were hired by guilds to keep tabs on rival merchants. You once met one. She posed as a beggar near the main fountain and knew everything. For a piece of bread and a compliment about her pigeons, she told you where your target dined and how often he forgot to tie his belt properly. You also develop a keen eye for plague carts. They're the medieval version of an ambulance and a garbage truck rolled into one. They serve another purpose, too. Cover. No one questions the person walking behind one, cloak pulled low, expression solemn. You follow one all the way to your target's neighborhood, nose covered against the stench. The closer you get, the more your nerves buzz. You walk past the house twice, once too fast, once too slow. You cough near the gate to test for guards. Nothing. You note the servant girl who opens a shutter to dump water, probably twice a day, mid-morning and late afternoon. It's almost time, but not tonight. Tonight, you fade back into the crowd, buy a crust of bread, and chew in silence as the church bells toll. This is the rhythm of the city, noisy, nosy, and entirely uninterested in your well-being. But for a patient killer, it's a blessing in disguise. You make your way back to the hayloft, avoiding eye contact, stepping over sleeping dogs and puddles that might just be soup. You crawl onto your lice-ridden bed, curl up with your boots still on, and whisper your plan aloud once, just to hear it. Tomorrow, kitchen door, sunset, quick, quiet, gone. And then, mercifully, sleep. You wake to the sound of hooves clattering over cobblestones and someone shouting about cabbages. The baker below is already banging around, cursing yeast as if it personally wronged him. You stretch, stiff and sore, brush straw off your cloak, and climb down quietly. Today's the day, but first, you need to look the part. Urban stealth isn't about invisibility, it's about being forgettable. You can't exactly vanish in a puff of smoke, but you can blend in with the background noise of city life. A hunched back, a limp, a fake prayer mumble. You make yourself smaller, slower, just another piece of the human machinery clunking along through the morning market. And when it comes to hiding in plain sight, nothing helps more than a bad smell. Medieval cities are olfactory battlegrounds, and if you're fortunate enough to roll in something fishy near the docks, no one comes near you for hours. You achieve this by accidentally tripping into a heap of fish guts and old leeks behind the fishmonger's stall. Disgusting? Yes. Effective? Incredibly. You pass unbothered through the streets, trailing just enough stink to give you space, but not enough to draw official attention. No guard wants to interrogate the person who smells like fermented eels. Your target is in a better part of town, where buildings are timber-framed and streets are slightly less soup-like. Guards are more alert, doors more solid. You find a shadowed corner and pretend to pick at a sore on your ankle while watching the comings and goings. That kitchen door, still opening, still closing, a delivery of onions goes in, a potboy scampers out. You clock the rhythm. You start rehearsing the entry. Walk, stumble, slip inside as someone exits. Then hide behind the barrels until the hall is empty. Easy, maybe. Historians still debate whether assassins in cities worked with local thieves' guilds or operated solo. Some records suggest coordination, shared bribes, safe houses, codes scratched into doors. Others show solitary figures, known only by nickname and whisper, passing through like fever dreams. You're more of a solo act. You've asked around in the past, tried to make contact with a rumored guild in Rouen. All you got was a concussion and a lesson in minding your own business. But still, cities hum with hidden systems. You recognize signals, chalk marks on doors, a tilted shutter indicating a friendly safe house. Even the color of laundry hung from a particular balcony might mean something. Danger, aid, or a reminder that medieval underpants were mostly theoretical. You adjust your belt where the tiny vial of poison sits tucked between coin pouches. You've opted for a subtler approach this time. Not a knife, not a crossbow. Just a few drops in the wine cup, assuming you can get close enough. Problem is, people don't dine alone here. The household is always in motion. Maids, squires, cousins, uninvited guests. You overhear one serving girl complain about that awful troubadour with the lute who never leaves. Great. Just what you need. A musical witness. You wait. You loiter. You pretend to inspect a barrel with unusual intensity. Eventually, the lull comes. A change of shift. A cart breaks down in the street and draws everyone's attention. You move. The kitchen door creaks open. You slide in as a potboy exits, muttering about butter. You hold your breath, squeeze past a pile of turnips, and duck into the pantry. It's dark, cool, smells like onions and fear. You listen. The hall is empty. You step out, careful, gliding more than walking. A silver tray sits nearby with wine goblets arranged in neat rows. One of them, is for your target. It's labeled with a tiny painted sigil on the stem. Fancy, but convenient. You work fast. 3 drops, stir with a twig, replace the cup. And just like that, your part is done. All that's left is getting out before someone starts asking why the garlic delivery boy is breathing heavily behind the curtain. You retrace your steps, nearly trip over a cat, catch your sleeve on a hook, and tear a hole in your only semi-clean shirt. But eventually, you're out, back in the alley, sweating, trembling, alive. The world hasn't changed. The streets still bustle, children still play, bells still chime. But inside, someone is slowly making their way toward a very unfortunate wine goblet. You don't stick around. That's rule number 3. Never stay for the aftermath. Fringe note: there are reports of professional mourners who doubled as spies, attending funerals to ensure targets were actually dead. You consider adding that to your services, maybe with a dramatic black veil and some well-rehearsed sobbing. But for now, you slip back to the market. You buy an apple. It's mealy, but real. You eat it slowly as you walk toward the city gate, trying to look like someone who hasn't just committed a very quiet murder. There's a strange peace to these post-job moments. You're lighter, emptier. Your brain stops buzzing. Your hands stop twitching. You finally breathe without that tickle of panic at the edge of your ribs. You've survived again. And if your timing's right, by the time you reach the next town, someone else will be needing your particular skill set. Because in a world of inheritance feuds, bishop grudges, and misplaced pride, there's always someone who want someone else not to wake up tomorrow. There's a misconception that monasteries were places of peace, prayer, and suspiciously good honey. And while that's mostly true, especially about the honey, what they don't tell you is that monasteries were also excellent hubs for whispered revenge, political manipulation, and the occasional discreet murder for hire. Yes, beneath those robes and behind the Latin chants, some monks had side gigs that were, let's say, morally flexible. You've been summoned to one now, not to pray, not to confess, but because someone behind those tall, ivy-covered walls wants someone dead, and they want it done with the efficiency of divine intervention and the discretion of a library mouse. The monastery rises on a hill like a loaf of crumbling brown bread, its stone walls streaked with moss and soot. The bell tolls as you approach, its low tone somehow both holy and ominous. You knock at the side door 3 times, just like the note instructed, and are greeted by a very old monk with eyebrows like frightened caterpillars. He says nothing, just nods, turns, and hobbles ahead. You follow. The halls smell like candle wax, damp stone, and medicinal herbs. Somewhere, someone is chanting about virtue. Somewhere else, someone is plotting a murder. Your contact is a monk named Brother Tertullian. He's not the warm type, more parchment than man, with a voice like a whetstone on a dry blade. He speaks in euphemisms. Our abbey has a pressing distraction, and we would appreciate a resolution free from worldly entanglements. Translation: someone nearby is causing monthly headaches, and they'd like them to have a sudden and unexplained conversion to being dead. The target? A former noble who took refuge here after losing favor at court. He's loud, he's arrogant, and he's taken to lecturing the monks about theology while misquoting scripture. This, apparently, is unforgivable. Historians still argue whether such monastic contracts were common or rare exceptions. Some claim monasteries occasionally acted as neutral ground, even harboring assassins between jobs in exchange for future favors. Others think these were isolated incidents, just grumpy monks taking extreme measures against problematic guests. But you're standing in front of one now, so that debate feels less abstract. Brother Tertullian gives you a room, barely larger than a cupboard, and tells you to pray often. You nod solemnly, then immediately get to work. You adopt the robes of a lay brother, quiet, useful, invisible. You sweep. You tend a few goats. You help in the apothecary, which is slightly terrifying given your own history with herbs. And all the while you observe. The target is as obnoxious as advertised. He strolls around like the abbey is his personal estate. Misquotes Cicero. Eats more than his share of barley stew. You even catch him trying to flirt with the beekeeper's apprentice. Badly. And every time he opens his mouth, Brother Tertullian's knuckles go a little whiter. You wait. That's the assassin's best friend, next to doors that don't squeak. You bide your time until the noble develops a habit. Afternoon naps in the herb garden, under the fig tree, head tilted back, mouth open like a confused frog. That's your window. Fringe tidbit? Some medieval monks believed that certain herbs could soothe the soul into eternity. There's a debated text from a Czech abbey listing poppy syrup, hemlock paste, and what appears to be powdered beetle shell. Whether it worked or not is unclear. Beetle allergies weren't well documented. You opt for something subtler. a tincture of belladonna and thyme, disguised in a small flask of herbal cordial. You find it near the apothecary and offer it to the noble under the pretense of digestive aid. He laughs, calls you Brother Bellyache, and downs it in one go. Within minutes, he's asleep, deeply, permanently. The monks find him the next morning looking peaceful beneath the fig tree, a smile on his lips. They say it was a blessed passing. They sing psalms. Brother Tertullian doesn't smile, but he leaves a small cloth pouch in your cell before sunrise. It contains silver and a dried fig, payment and a snack. You leave before breakfast. No goodbyes, no blessings, just the quiet road and the knowledge that you're now part of a very exclusive club. The handful of people who know that not all monks are pacifists and not all prayers go unanswered. As you trudge away from the abbey, the bells toll again behind you, not in mourning, not exactly in celebration, just acknowledgement. You've done your part, and in a world full of secrets, the monks are some of the best at keeping them. You're back on the road, dust in your eyes, and that faint, unsettling feeling that someone might be following you. That's normal. Paranoia is practically part of the job description, but now you've got a new contract, and this one's taking you across a border. Which brings us to your least favorite part of the profession, language barriers. You'd think that killing someone quietly would transcend language. After all, a dagger is a dagger in any tongue, right? Wrong. Communication matters, not just with clients, but with gatekeepers, guards, townsfolk, and those nosy innkeepers who always ask a few too many questions. Your target lives in a castle in the Rhineland, which means you're headed into the Holy Roman Empire. You speak maybe 3 words of German, and 2 of them are cheese and no. The third is probably a profanity. Not exactly helpful for delicate negotiations or asking directions to the latrine. Still, you try. You learn by listening, overhearing gossip in markets, mimicking phrases like a parrot with head trauma. You adopt gestures, nods, shrugs, a wide-eyed expression that says, "I'm just a lost pilgrim with an oddly sharp walking stick." At the border, a guard stops you. He's tall, smells like sausages, and asks something that sounds urgent. You panic and say, "Cheese, no," and then cough. He squints at you, mutters something about idiots, and waves you through. Success? Cities in this region are different. Grayer, quieter, more suspicious. You try your usual tactics. Fish smell for camouflage, muttering about saints, and stuffing straw in your shoes to look humble. It mostly works. Until someone hands you a church pamphlet and you respond with a panicked smile and a sneeze. Historians still argue how mobile assassins were across linguistic and cultural lines. Some theories suggest networks of translators or multilingual mercenaries helped bridge the gap. Others claim assassins had to rely on gestures, drawings, or sheer dumb luck. You're relying on all 3. Your client meets you in a candlelit cellar. He's wearing a fur-lined tunic and has a nose like a turnip. He speaks quickly, gesturing wildly, then pulls out a wax tablet and draws a very bad stick figure with a crown. You nod slowly. Ah, a royal target. This will end well. He tries to explain how you'll gain entry, something involving a wine shipment and a suspiciously heavy barrel. You nod again. Smile. Pretend you understand. You don't, not even slightly. But you've done weirder things than climbing inside barrels. You sneak into the castle the next evening, rolled in like a cask of Rhine red. It's dark, cramped, smells like raisins and wood shavings. You feel like a half-fermented pickle. The plan, if you understood it correctly, is to wait until the feast begins, then exit the barrel, sneak upstairs, and deal with the problem. But you weren't told which room or floor or what the target actually looks like. Fringe historical fact. There's an apocryphal tale about a 13th century assassin who disguised himself as a wine merchant and spent 4 days in a cellar waiting for a signal that never came. He eventually left, confused, only to find his client had been excommunicated and fled to Spain. You feel a strange kinship with that man. Eventually, the barrel tips. You tumble out, groggy and bruised, into a storeroom filled with hams. No one's around. Good start. You creep through stone corridors, dodging torchlight, and peek into rooms. One holds a snoring dog. Another, a snoring noble. Another, a couple not snoring, and very much awake. You retreat, red-faced. Finally, you find your man, or at least someone who looks vaguely like the stick figure drawing. He's wearing a circlet and yelling at a servant. Close enough. You go for subtlety. A little powder in his wine, same as before. It works like a charm. He slumps forward, snoring into a meat pie. You slip away. But here's the catch. As you exit, you hear voices. And not just any voices, angry ones. Turns out you didn't kill the right person. Not a noble, not even a politician. Just the castle steward who really liked wearing fancy hats and yelling at people. You've got to run, now. You race through the halls, cloak flying, your boots slapping on the stone like panicked applause. Someone shouts in German. You respond in panic English. Someone throws a roast duck. You duck the duck. You make it to the outer gate just in time to catch a merchant's cart rolling out. You leap in, hide under a tarp of smoked eels, and hold your breath for 20 minutes. Eventually, the noise fades. You're out, not unscathed. Your dignity took a beating, but you're breathing. And when you check your pack, you find the client still paid you. Turns out the steward was causing problems, just not the right problems. So you chalk it up as a partial win. Another job, another story, another reminder that cross-cultural communication is not your strongest skill. You vow to learn more phrases like wrong guy, sorry, and do you have directions to the border, please? But for now, it's enough to be alive, smelly, and vaguely victorious. You smell like smoked eel, again, but that's just part of the lifestyle. After that eel-scented escape, you're back on safer ground, relatively speaking. No borders to cross this time, just another job. A simple one, they say, a quick, clean dispatch, nothing too dramatic. Of course, no one ever talks about the part where you have to practice, because you don't just wake up with the perfect aim of a ballista operator on espresso. Skill takes time. And medieval assassins, they don't have training grounds or mentorship programs. No shadowy courtyard where you learn the art of silent combat from a grizzled master who only speaks in riddles. You have a cellar, maybe a cave, possibly a very patient goat. That's your training environment. A damp, dimly lit space where the only audience is mold and the occasional curious rodent. You do what you can with what you have. Practice stabbing old sacks stuffed with hay, toss knives at rotten apples nailed to walls, whisper your plans to the wind in hopes it doesn't gossip. And the knives, Don't even start. They're not fancy balanced weapons forged by artisan smiths. They're whatever you could get your hands on. Butcher's knives, dull daggers, a kitchen cleaver you borrowed from an inn which still smells faintly of onions. Your accuracy is inconsistent. You once threw a blade at a target and hit a beam so solidly that it rebounded and nearly took out your own knee. A humbling moment. You set up targets, circles drawn on parchment, faces sketched from vague descriptions, and one very unsettling doll made of turnips and twine. You name it. Gilbert. You develop a strange relationship with Gilbert. Sometimes you apologize to him after a particularly bad throw. Fringe fact? Some early texts from the Middle East suggest that assassins trained with sound cues, striking only when a bell or whisper fell silent. The idea was to teach stillness, patience, and the kind of focus only monks or murderers ever really achieve. You try it once with a cowbell. It works until the cow finds it and eats your practice logbook. You also work on speed, drawing your dagger without slicing your leg open, moving through a door frame without knocking over your own elbow, trying to walk without sounding like a sack of potatoes falling downstairs. There's a special kind of frustration that comes with botching a stealth roll in real life. One time, you stepped on a squeaky floorboard and startled a cat so violently it yowled for 10 minutes straight. Your hiding spot was compromised. Your dignity, irreparably so. You practice movements too. The way you lean, the way you crouch, the way you pretend you didn't just trip on your own cloak hem. It's part ballet, part accidental slapstick. You are not, strictly speaking, graceful, but you're persistent. And sometimes that's enough. But the real art, the thing no one ever tells you, is learning how to wait. You practice waiting, sitting still for hours, breathing shallow, eyes fixed on a door that never opens, muscles tensed in the exact wrong position. Your legs cramp, your feet go numb. Once, you sneeze and scare yourself so badly you nearly stab Gilbert. Historians still argue whether assassins actually underwent formal practice or just learned through experience. One camp believes in organized systems passed down through generations. Another insists it was purely improvisational, trial by fire, dagger, and desperate bluff. In your case, it's mostly desperation. With a little whisper of self-loathing when your throw misses again, you also experiment with distractions. Coins tossed to draw attention, a loose tile nudged to make someone look away. One of your favorite tools? A small pouch of dried beans. Thrown with just the right spin, they rattle perfectly against walls. Cheap, versatile, noisy. You call them rattle peas. Not your most fearsome invention, but effective. One afternoon, you spot a squirrel outside and throw a bean at it. It attacks the bean, then climbs your cloak and tries to nest in your hood. You spend the next hour evicting a very determined rodent and reconsidering your career choices. You take note of everything. The way light falls through a crack. The timing of footsteps above your hiding place. The subtle shift of shadows as the sun creeps across your lair. Sometimes you wonder what your life might have been if you'd gone into pottery, or beekeeping, or just stuck with that brief stint as a traveling juggler. You were terrible, of course, but at least no one died, except that one chicken, and you still argue that wasn't your fault. You train until your muscles ache and your fingers bleed. You mutter curses at blades that won't fly straight. You lecture Gilbert on proper posture. You daydream about buying a crossbow one day, one that actually shoots in the direction you point it. But you keep going, because one day, when the moment comes, when the window is narrow, the breath is held, the target is halfway through a prayer, you'll only have one chance, one flick of the wrist, one quiet breath, one opportunity to remind someone that they've made just enough enemies to require your attention. And Gilbert, he'll be proud, probably. The romantic image of the noble assassin, cloak fluttering, blade gleaming, justice whispered on the wind, it's nonsense. Let's be honest. You're not here for glory. You're here because this job pays slightly more than herding goats. And goats, as you know from experience, are jerks. You didn't choose this life out of principle. You chose it because you were out of options. Too clever for field work, too suspicious looking for a monastery, and too good with a knife to be ignored. The myth of the philosophical killer dispensing moral balance with every strike, that sells ballads. It doesn't pay rent. Your most recent contract was a textbook example of this gritty reality. A tax collector wanted dead, not because he was cruel or corrupt, but because he was very, very punctual. Your client, a merchant drowning in debt, decided murder was more cost-effective than repayment. You're not proud, but you're also not hungry anymore, and that counts for something. Your job isn't about valor. It's logistics, entry points, distractions, timing, payment negotiation, disposal strategy. You spend more time squatting in bushes than a squirrel with social anxiety, and you certainly don't get a thank you card when the job is done. And let's talk about pay for a second. You risk life, limb, and occasional divine retribution, and in return, you get a bag of mixed coins, 2 of which are definitely counterfeit, and a pair of blessed socks. You once got paid in salted herring. Once, just 1 herring. Sometimes your clients are wealthy. They wear velvet and talk in circles. They use words like remedy and quiet the situation. You nod along, trying not to gag on the scent of expensive rosewater and insincerity. They act like they're doing you a favor. You're the one with blood on your boots and no dental coverage. You've come to understand how the rich see people like you, a tool, a threat, a secret best left unspoken. If you're caught, they don't know you, never heard of you, might even deny knowing how to pronounce assassin. Suddenly it's all who and how dreadful and fetch my priest. Fringe fact. In some medieval courts, the act of hiring a killer was so taboo, they'd outsource it to another noble, who would then outsource it to someone like you. By the time you're creeping through the gardens, the contract has passed through 4 layers of deniability. And when you finish the job, there's no victory march, no applause, no triumphant music swelling in the background. You hide the body, wipe your blade on someone's discarded tunic, and vanish. If you're lucky, your cloak doesn't catch on a bush and leave a dramatic trail of wool fibers to your hiding place. You've lost count of how many names you've been given. None of them are your real one. The Sparrow, Ash Cloak, Quiet Felix. You even got called the Sneezer once after an unfortunate allergic reaction mid-job. That one stuck longer than you'd like. But no matter the name, you're not a hero. Heroes have stories told about them. You're the thing whispered between stories when the fire's low and someone remembers a cousin who just stopped showing up one day. And you feel it too. The weight of anonymity. No legacy, no family crest, just bruises, scars, and a memory full of locked doors and dying gasps. Yet you keep going. Why? Because it's simple. It's clear. There are no speeches or alliances or politics. There is a target. There is you. And when the job is done, the ledger balances, if not morally, then at least financially. Sometimes, in rare moments of reflection, you wonder what kind of person you'd be in another life. A candlemaker, a musician, a bad poet with a fondness for ducks. Anything but this. But then again, in this life, you've become very good at not dying. That's something. And you do find your own quiet code. No children, no bystanders, no jobs for free. You don't take pleasure in it, but you don't shy away either. You're like fire, dangerous, necessary, and very bad at making friends. Historians sometimes label your kind as mercenary figures or agents of clandestine warfare, but what they miss, what they always miss, is that most of you were just people. Tired, hungry, often scared, sometimes a little sad, and always moving. You eat where you can, sleep when it's safe, and every now and then you sit by a river watching the water flow and pretend that you're something else, just for a moment. But then it's back to business. There's always another name, another client, another stew to stir a little more carefully than usual. You're not noble, you're not legendary, you're just still here. And in this line of work, that's rare enough to feel like a win. You never really think about getting caught until it happens. And when it does happen, it usually goes something like this. One too many eyes, one careless move, one guard who just happened to glance up at exactly the wrong or right moment. You're tackled. Rough hands grab your arms. Your blade clatters to the floor. Someone shouts something that sounds vaguely righteous. The crowd gasps. You're shoved face first into dirt or flagstones, depending on the wealth of your surroundings, and then it's just shackles, bruises, and dread. Being captured as an assassin is not like being captured as, say, a goat thief. A goat thief might get a beating, a fine, maybe even a public shaming with turnips. You're about to meet the full, unpleasant force of medieval interrogation. There are no laws protecting someone like you. You're not a prisoner of war. You're not a political asset. You're a problem to be solved, preferably loudly, and in a way that makes a good example for the townsfolk. You're thrown into a dungeon, not a sleek stone cell with iron bars and dramatic lighting. No, this is a cave, a hole, a wet rat-flavored closet with straw that's 20% hay and 80% old nightmares. You are, to put it kindly, not at your best. Guards come. They ask questions. Where did you come from? Who paid you? Was it the Duke? The Bishop? That one weird cousin who always wore velvet gloves? You don't answer, because that's the code. Also, because your mouth is dry and you're trying not to vomit from the smell of whatever died in the corner. Sometimes, if you're lucky, they believe you're a drunk lunatic who stabbed someone randomly. You get a quicker end. If you're unlucky, they believe you're part of a conspiracy. Then the fun begins. Historians still argue how formalized torture was in this period. Some say it followed specific rules. Questions asked, tools approved, outcomes documented. Others argue it was a free-for-all. Whatever the guards could find, they used. In practice, it varies. One castle might use a rack. Another prefers sleep deprivation and cold water. One memorable evening, you were tied to a chair while a particularly enthusiastic noble just yelled, "Why?" over and over again. Not painful exactly, just confusing. You learn to give them enough to be believable, but not enough to betray your client. "A man in red paid me," you mutter. "He had a limp," which statistically is true of about a quarter of the male nobility. Not exactly a lead. You buy time. You faint on cue. You cry, if you can manage it. You wet yourself, not hard considering the circumstances, and mutter prayers in fake dialects. Anything to make them pause, anything to keep them guessing. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the people questioning you are more interested in appearing effective than actually uncovering truth. So when the bishop gets his nightly report that the assassin has confessed to acting alone, likely mad, they feel safer. And you get to live. Sort of. Even if they stop torturing you, they rarely let you go. You're tossed into a dungeon until they forget you're there or until someone bribes your release. And when that doesn't happen, you escape. Or you try to. Fringe tidbit. A Milanese assassin in the 1400s reportedly escaped by convincing a jailer that he was a wandering friar who had simply lost his way in the Lord. Whether it worked due to divine luck or the jailer's general confusion is still debated, but the assassin vanished without a trace. You once escaped through a latrine chute. You do not recommend it. It was narrow, slick, and it deposited you into what can only be described as the worst-smelling river in Europe. But you were free. From then on, you always checked for latrines before accepting a job. It's your version of planning ahead. Still, getting captured does something to your mind. You become jumpier. You start imagining crossbows behind every curtain. You second-guess yourself when walking through doorways. You dream of shackles. You flinch at the sound of keys. And the real punishment? It's not the pain, not the shame. It's the silence after. The way no one speaks to you for days. The way your clients disappear like ghosts. The way the world moves on while you sit in a cell watching mold grow on your own boots. Eventually, someone gets bored, or distracted, or assassinated, ironically. You find a window. You escape. Or, if you're really fortunate, someone from the underground hears about your capture and decides you're still useful enough to retrieve. That happened once. You woke up in a cart filled with turnips, your wrists untied, a loaf of bread in your lap. No note, just a new map with a marked location. The message was clear. No time for rest. No thanks for survival. Just another job. Capture teaches you what legends never mention. That fear is not thrilling. It is dull, heavy. It sits on your chest like a stone and doesn't let up, even when you run. You become good at managing it. You smile through it, joke about it to yourself while hiding under haystacks. But it never leaves, and still you go on, because the job doesn't stop, and neither do you. You'd think meeting another assassin would be comforting, like recognizing a fellow stray dog, a nod across the tavern, a mutual understanding of sleepless nights and weird blisters, but that's not how it works. The first time you run into one, it's not dramatic. No rooftop duel, no blade-on-blade showdown beneath a blood moon, just two people reaching for the same poisoned apple at a market stall. You both freeze, you both look up, and then you both back away. Slowly, cautiously, like cats deciding whether to fight or just pretend the other doesn't exist. Turns out, the medieval assassin community is small, tense, and utterly petty. There are no assassin guilds with secret handshakes and matching rings. If such things existed, no one invited you. What you do have are loosely connected webs of rumors, aliases, and safe houses you're never quite sure are still safe. And if you do stumble upon another assassin, they are almost always one of three things. 1. Annoyed. 2. Paranoid. Or 3. Trying to figure out if you're stealing their contract. This happens more often than you'd like. You arrive in town, case the manor, identify your target, and then catch someone else already lurking under the stairs with a crossbow and a smug expression. What follows is a silent negotiation made entirely of shrugs, scowls, and eyebrow choreography. Who's closer to the target? Who's more likely to pull it off cleanly? Who will the client pay? If you're smart and lucky, you agree to split the fee. That happened once in Avignon. You and a tall, silent woman with a scar shaped like a question mark both showed up at the same Duke's ball. You poisoned the soup. She hexed the salt. The Duke went face down into his roast pheasant, and you both vanished into the night. She even gave you half her biscuit. Fringe trivia. One apocryphal letter from 13th century Venice references a circle of quiet knives, allegedly a pact between 5 hired killers who agreed not to interfere with each other's work, except on Tuesdays. Historians disagree whether this was real, a joke, or part of an elaborate code for smuggling sausages. Most of the time, though, assassin interactions are more like run-ins between rival pigeons, posturing, subtle threats. One memorable encounter in a Roman alley ended with both of you throwing cabbages at each other and shouting accusations about stealing styles. Yes, styles. Because among assassins, the biggest insult isn't murder, it's unoriginality. You once had someone accuse you of copying their garrote and go method, as if strangling people was some kind of signature dance move. You get judged for your tools, too. You still use blowpipes? They sneer. So, provincial. You want to scream, at least my last client survived long enough to pay me? But you don't. You just glare and go sharpen your poisoned hairpin in passive-aggressive silence. And there's always one show-off in every region. The assassin who dresses like a lord, talks like a bard, and claims to have single-handedly eliminated a sultan using nothing but perfume and a suggestive eyebrow. You smile politely, then make a mental note to never work within 50 miles of them. You once tried to start a truce, just a loose, informal system of warning signs for towns that were taken or targets already claimed. You carved a tiny symbol into a doorframe, hoping it would catch on. It didn't. Someone thought it was a baker's mark and hired you to deliver 12 loaves by Tuesday. Still, now and then, there's a flicker of solidarity, a knowing glance, a past message, a hint about a corrupt noble's schedule. It's never quite friendship, but it's not hostility either. It's professional courtesy, like nodding to someone who also eats soup alone in dark corners. But the darker side? Oh, it's there. Because sometimes those other assassins aren't here for the same job as you. They're here for you. Yes, turns out you're not the only one who accepts contracts with vague names and questionable motives. One time in Prague, you found a note under your door. Just a name. Yours. In someone else's handwriting. No signature. No explanation. You didn't sleep for 3 days. It's a weird experience, realizing you've become someone's payday. You walk differently, eat cautiously, sleep in shifts. You stop drinking anything you didn't make yourself. You watch rooftops, You check for shadows where shadows shouldn't be, and sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes it was just a scare, or a warning, or a prank by that show-off assassin with the scented gloves. But other times, someone gets close. You never forget that. Historians don't have records of assassin feuds. They weren't the kind of thing you wrote down, but you suspect there were many. Quiet vendettas, long games, mutual destruction with no witnesses left to tell the tale. So you stay careful. You keep moving. And when you do meet someone like you, someone with the same gait, the same eyes that never quite settle, you nod once. Not in friendship, but in understanding. You both made the same impossible choice, and you're both trying to survive it. Disguises. The assassin's last resort, first defense, and eternal source of personal embarrassment. Because here's the truth. Most disguises in the medieval world are about as convincing as a potato in a masquerade mask. No one teaches you how to do this. There's no wardrobe department, no magical glamours, just you, your face, and a sack of second-hand garments that smell like damp hay and regret. Your disguise kit contains such treasures as a ragged monk's robe 2 sizes too small, a faded nun's wimple that gives you hives, a curly wig made from what you suspect is pig hair, and a very itchy beard that looks convincing only if your target is extremely nearsighted. You've worn all of them, sometimes at the same time. And the accents? Oh, don't get started on the accents. One time you tried to sound Italian. You ended up inventing a completely new dialect that confused everyone, including yourself. You now stick to vague mumbling and dramatic sighs. One of your more successful personas was Brother Sylvester, a mild-mannered monk who wandered with a fake limp and recited slightly wrong Latin prayers. It got you into 3 monasteries, a noble's library, and accidentally promoted to assistant scribe for a week. You only left because the ink fumes made your nose bleed, and you spelled repentance with 2 N's and a fish. Fringe fact? A 15th century handbook for court entertainers included an entire chapter on dissembling appearance, essentially medieval cosplay tips. It recommended soot for darkening beards, vinegar to soften wigs, and goose fat for sticking things to your face. You've tried all 3. The goose fat never fully washed out. You once disguised yourself as a leper. It worked perfectly until a real leper noticed and started a loud theological argument about divine punishment and imposter scabs. You had to flee through a vineyard wearing nothing but bandages and hope. And don't forget the props. Walking sticks, satchels filled with dried herbs, prayer books with hollow compartments. You once spent an hour carving fake rosary beads out of stale bread. They fell apart mid-blessing. Your target laughed so hard he didn't notice the knife until it was too late. Disguises serve more than just entry. They're distractions, misdirection. You're not sneaking through the front door. You're invited. You're not the danger. You're the laundress, the scribe, the overly chatty pilgrim with halitosis and terrible shoes. One job had you dress as a chimney sweep to access the servant passages in a large manner. You covered yourself in soot, climbed halfway up a flue, then got stuck for 2 hours listening to the head cook yell at a turnip. You did eventually make it out. The turnip did not. But the best disguise you ever pulled? Father Odo. Full clerical gear, wooden crucifix, and a voice like burnt honey. You even delivered a short sermon on humility to a suspicious guard. He wept. You slipped past him and into the chamber where your actual task awaited. You still wonder what happened to that guard. Hopefully, he took up gardening. Historians still argue whether assassins in the Middle Ages had standardized disguises or relied entirely on local improvisation. Some claim certain traveling garb, like pilgrim robes and healer cloaks, became unofficial uniforms for killers. Others insist the variety was so broad that a clever assassin could vanish into any crowd, any role, any class. You side with the improvisation camp, mostly because standardized disguises would require cooperation. And as we've discussed, your peers aren't exactly big on team building. There's a subtle art to dressing down, looking poor enough to be ignored, but not so ragged you're thrown out. Dirty enough to blend in, but not so offensive that guards poke you with sticks. You cultivate a very precise level of dishevelment. You call it respectably unpleasant. One time, you tried to pose as a noble. Just once. You borrowed a doublet from a dead dandy, powdered your face with flour, and attempted to walk like someone with opinions about wine. It lasted 15 minutes. You were called out by an 8-year-old who shouted, "He's wearing his boots backwards." Lesson learned. Still, disguises have saved your life more than once. You've evaded capture by dressing as a stable hand, a weaver, a toothless alewife, and on one unfortunate occasion, a very tall nun. Each role came with its own challenges. Nuns, for example, are expected to be silent and pious. You're not great at either. And the beard glue? You try not to think about it. Your face has seen things. Sticky things. What most people don't realize is that disguises aren't just about fooling others. They're about becoming someone else, slipping into a persona so fully that even your heartbeat changes. You breathe differently, think differently, walk like someone who's never even heard of a hidden blade. It's exhausting. After a few days in disguise, you forget your real voice. You answer to the wrong name. You start blessing people in doorways and quoting scripture at ducks. That's when you know it's time to stop. So you burn the beard, wash off the soot, pack the wig, and step back into yourself, whoever that is. Because sometimes you're not even sure anymore. You wake up with a start to the sound of bells, church bells, not alarm bells, though sometimes the difference is purely spiritual. You're camped just outside a small village, recovering from your most recent foray into religious cosplay, and you're reminded of something very specific. The church both hates you and occasionally hires you. It's a tricky relationship. One day you're a heretic. The next, you're an instrument of divine will. It all depends on who's paying and how inconvenient the target is to their plans. You've lost count of the number of times a bishop's sermon has condemned the shadow workers of sin and silence. More than once, you've sat in the pews during those sermons, nodding solemnly, a vial of something unpleasant tucked inside your sleeve. But the hypocrisy? Oh, it's rich. Because for all their incense and incense-tinged moral superiority, the clergy aren't above needing discreet services, particularly when a rival abbot grows too influential, or a scribe threatens to leak an embarrassing letter, or a cardinal's illegitimate cousin gets a little too comfortable at court. And that's where you come in. You've met priests who wouldn't blink at slipping a sedative into someone's holy water. One monk even gave you a blessing for swift hands. You thanked him, then stole his cheese. Your latest assignment comes wrapped in vellum and sealed with ecclesiastical red wax. It's wordy, all flowery phrasing and passive-aggressive holiness. A certain member of the cloth has wandered astray from the path of righteousness and should be guided back with firmness and mercy. Translation, make it look like divine judgment. No blood, no mess. Just a quiet end for someone who knows too much or kneels too little. You head to the target's abbey, a fortress-like structure surrounded by gardens and gossiping friars. You pose as a pilgrim, footsore and humble, mumbling about visions of St. Crispin and a burning bread oven. No one questions you. They've seen weirder. Inside, the abbey is beautiful. High ceilings, golden icons, and a faint smell of beeswax and mildew. Monks bustle quietly, nodding at one another with that practiced blend of piety and suspicion. You keep your eyes low, your hands folded, but your mind is racing. The target is Brother Aloysius, a librarian with too many opinions and a troubling tendency to write them down. He's supposedly penned a treatise that challenges church policy on tithes. More dangerously, he's been sharing copies. Your job isn't to kill him in front of a crowd. That would make a martyr. Your job is to make him disappear. Or better yet, seem like he simply faded. Fringe fact. Some monastic orders believed in holy silence, going entire days without speaking. Assassins occasionally exploited this, slipping through cloisters where no one would dare break the silence, even if they saw something suspicious. You once snuck past a sleeping monk and a half-awake cat in just such a place. You think the cat still judges you. You track Aloysius's schedule, morning prayers, library hours, private meditations near the fish pond. You watch him feed ducks. You find this mildly insulting, considering you've been hired to murder a man who routinely tosses crumbs to quacking friends. You choose your moment carefully. He drinks tea in the scriptorium during copying hours. A small flask of tincture, a few drops on the rim of his goblet, and you retreat. Simple, quiet, no fireworks. He dies peacefully during vespers, head bowed, candlelight flickering, surrounded by chanting voices. Most think it was a blessed end. He was always so devout, they say. The perfect death for a man of God. No one notices the missing quill from his pocket. You keep it, a small token. Not for sentiment exactly, just proof. You leave with less ceremony than you arrived. A slight limp, a murmured goodbye, and a new set of calluses on your knees from overly enthusiastic praying. Historians still argue about how closely church officials worked with underground agents. Some say there were entire networks of papal assassins operating under secret authority. Others believe that any such connections were isolated and opportunistic. You believe the latter. If there were papal assassins, they didn't invite you to their retreats. Still, the irony doesn't escape you. For all the sermons about righteousness, you've been quietly sponsored by men in cassocks more than once. Their morality is flexible. Their coin is good. And their motives? Surprisingly human. You don't feel good about it, but you don't feel bad either. You stopped measuring right and wrong somewhere between a baron's stew pot and a duchess's poison ring. Now, it's about survival. And if that means occasionally being God's left hand in the shadows, well, you're sure the Almighty has stranger tools than you, probably. There's a rule you try to live by. Never trust anyone who pays you in advance and smiles too much. It's the kind of smile you see on nobles who've already decided they'll betray you. but want to enjoy the performance before the curtain falls. This latest client? A young prince with soft hands, a sharper than average sword, and more ambition than common sense. He hires you to remove a rival, his cousin, a baron with better cheekbones and twice the land. The coin is good, the directions are clear, and the castle is conveniently understaffed during feast week. You get in, do the job, crossbow, south tower, bit of theatrical falling, and leave unnoticed. By your standards, it's practically elegant. But as you make your way back to the tavern rendezvous, guess who's not there? The prince, gone, with your second payment, and possibly your name handed to local guards on a very flattering, wanted sketch. This isn't new. In the world of assassins, allegiances shift faster than ale prices. The people who hire you can and will turn on you if it makes them look noble or saves them half a bag of coin. You've learned to spot the signs, the way they pause before handing over the map, the way they say, "Of course, you'll be compensated," but won't quite meet your eye. The casual mention of, "Should you be caught, I'll deny everything." They think that's clever. You've heard it 13 times, so you go to ground. New town, new name. You dye your cloak with crushed berries and regret. You sell your old boots to a passing pilgrim and steal better ones off a washing line. You don't stop moving. But sometimes it's not just betrayal, it's replacement. A new client wants your former client dead, or the cousin of your last target hires you to correct the situation. You're a knife passed back and forth, pointed in whichever direction seems most useful today. And if someone doesn't like how that turns out, well, you become the target. Fringe fact: there are accounts, rare but grim, of assassins accepting 2 contracts in the same household. One noble hires you to kill his brother. The brother hires you to kill the noble. In the end, both are dead, and you leave with twice the payment and one very awkward dinner invitation unfulfilled. Historians still debate whether assassins in the Middle Ages operated on anything like honor. Some say there were unspoken codes: don't harm non-combatants, never double-cross a client who paid in full, avoid churches on Sundays. Others believe it was all survival all the time. You lean toward the latter. With enough coin, people will hire you to do anything. And with enough desperation, they'll betray you just as quickly. A bishop once tried to have you silenced with a bribe and a hit squad. He thought it would be poetic. You disagreed strongly and with a frying pan. You begin to develop instincts. You double-check escape routes, even at social events. You memorize the back alleys of every town you pass through. You learn to never eat food offered by a noble who insists it's harmless. Nothing that comes with that much reassurance is ever safe. Ever. There's a reason you sleep with a dagger under your pillow, a garrote in your boot, and a vial of oil to slick the stairs behind you. It's not paranoia. It's experience. You once had a deal go bad at a vineyard. The client told you to meet at the north wall by the ivy. You arrived early, just in time to see 2 armed men lurking in the ivy, whispering about your execution fee. You left a note in their wine barrel. Nice try. You've been proud of that one ever since. And when betrayal comes, and it does come, you've learned not to take it personally. That's the part most people don't get. It's not about you. It's about opportunity, greed, fear, sometimes even boredom. You're a tool, and when tools outlive their usefulness, people prefer them buried. So you build your own safety net. a few trusted contacts, an apothecary in Lyon who owes you her life, a retired smuggler in Lisbon who likes your company and hates priests, a mute stable hand in Ghent who once warned you about a poisoned saddle strap with just a glance. You don't call it a network, you call it insurance. One day, of course, it won't be enough. Someone will outplay you or outpay you. But until then, you keep one step ahead. You stay useful. You stay forgotten. You don't trust clients. You trust patterns, payment on time, targets chosen carefully, the ones who don't use words like inevitable or you're like a brother to me. Those are the dangerous ones. Brotherhood in this world is code for I'm about to betray you dramatically. So you finish the job, you collect your coin, and you vanish. Always vanish. No lingering, no second rounds, no favors. Favors get you killed, and if you must return, make sure you're not the one being hunted this time. You lie awake some nights, not from guilt, though that has its moments, but from something else. A low, persistent hum in your chest, a strange awareness of being watched, even in silence, especially in silence. The job doesn't just bruise your body, it rearranges your mind. You start seeing people differently. Every stranger is a threat, every window a sniper's nest, every shadow a question you'd rather not answer. Even the goats stare too long sometimes. There's one in Brittany that still haunts your dreams. You swear it knew. You eat alone, not because you want to, but because you have to. Shared meals lead to shared questions, and you don't have good answers. What do you do for a living? Why do you carry 4 knives and a spoon with holes in it? Why are you whispering to your soup? Even when no one's asking, your own brain fills in the gaps. Faces of people you've never met. Scenes you only imagined. That target in Aragon who cried before he fell. The noble woman in Paris who looked straight at you before sipping the wine. Did she know? Did she want to? You try to shake it off. This is the cost of the work, you tell yourself, like sore feet or lice, or falling asleep in haystacks and waking up with a chicken trying to nest on your stomach. But there are cracks in the armor, tiny ones. The dreams don't stop. One recurring nightmare features you chasing yourself through a burning abbey while everyone chants your name and no one tells you which version of you is real. It always ends with you jumping out a window that's not there. Fringe detail? Some historical accounts describe assassins in late medieval Italy who turned to mystics for protection, not from capture, but from their own memories. Charms to soothe the restless eye, herbs to bless the killing hand. You've tried similar. A sleep tea from a healer in Siena once left you hallucinating about musical pigs for a full day. You do not recommend it. You've also tried confession. Once. A quiet chapel, middle of nowhere. The priest was kind, his beard wildly unkempt. You mumbled about sin and shadows and what it meant to unmake a man with purpose. He told you that the soul is like a mirror, and you should try polishing yours more often. You left a coin in the offering box and haven't been back since. You've had close calls, moments where your knife froze midair, where you hesitated just long enough to see the fear in their eyes. You tell yourself it's instinct, not doubt. That's the official story. But unofficially, sometimes you see their faces again, not always clearly. Sometimes it's just the shoes, the way they held a cup, the tune they hummed when they didn't know you were listening. And guilt? It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It's subtle. It sits in your gut like a stone that never quite passes. And the longer you do this, the heavier it gets. You carry it in your posture, in your eyes, in the pauses between conversations that never happen. You start talking to animals, not in a mystical way, just because they don't ask for anything back. You once told a donkey all your regrets while crossing a ravine. The donkey brayed once, bit your sleeve, and kept walking. Honestly, best therapy you've had. Historians romanticize the stoicism of your kind, cold, calculating, unreadable, but they forget the toll, the aching fingers, the gnawing stomach, the realization that every name you erase was someone's son, daughter, lover, favorite chess partner. You don't need to know them. The fact is enough. You try to laugh it off. You make jokes to yourself about your own stupidity, about that time you slipped on a cabbage and nearly impaled a street performer. You talk to Gilbert again. Yes, that Gilbert, the turnip training doll. He travels with you now, quietly rotting in your pack, but still there, still listening. And then there are the ghosts. Not real ones, probably, but the sense that someone's walking beside you at night, just out of reach. You once turned and said, "What now?" into the darkness, as if expecting a reply. You swear you heard laughter. You start seeing symbols in everything. A crow flies west. Bad omen. 3 coins land heads up. Time to move towns. The color red on a nun's sash. Leave the village immediately. You don't believe in curses, but you do believe in patterns. And the pattern is clear. You keep going. You keep surviving, even when part of you wonders what exactly is left to survive for. You've never had a home, not a real one. Your bed is wherever you can curl your spine into a plausible shape. Your keepsakes fit in a pouch. Your legacy is written in silence, not song. But you're still here, still breathing, still moving from one town to the next like a shadow that forgot how to stop drifting. And for now, that's enough. So, let's say you've made it. Not just survived a job or two, but truly lasted. Through betrayals, bad weather, misplaced poison batches, goat-related trauma, and at least one assassination attempt that involved a pig, a ladder, and a bucket of apples. You've dodged swords and questions. You've watched castles rise and fall. You've even managed, somehow, to keep all your fingers. Now what? Retirement, right? The problem is, medieval assassins don't retire. There's no pension, no final handshake, no quaint ceremony where someone presents you with a golden dagger engraved, "Thanks for the mayhem." No. When assassins stop working, they tend to stop breathing soon after. You know of a few who tried? One became a baker in Bruges. Lasted 2 months before someone ordered 6 loaves and stabbed him in the cellar. Another fled to a monastery, shaved his head, chanted 3 times a day, until a suspiciously pious visitor accidentally knocked him into the baptismal font. He did not float. You've considered it, of course. Who wouldn't? Waking up without planning an exit route, eating food you didn't personally inspect for glistening powder or suspicious smells, growing something, apples, herbs, a beard, but it's never that simple. Because your name is out there, whichever one you were using at the time, maybe even a sketch, maybe even a story. The man with the quiet shoes, or the woman who killed the archbishop during Lent and vanished into fog. You are the fog now. So, what do? You drift, further and further from cities, contracts, consequences, into places where nobody asks questions, because no one has the energy to care. Swamps, mountains, half-collapsed villages where the only politics involve whose goat ate whose turnips. You live small. You pick a name no one can pronounce and claim you're from over the ridge. You become a little odd, quiet, but helpful. You fix doors, stitch cloaks, sharpen tools. Someone calls you the hermit, and it sticks. But it's not peace, not really, just stillness, a held breath. Because sooner or later, someone knocks on your door. Maybe it's a traveler, maybe it's a messenger who's heard whispers, maybe it's an old client with a new enemy and a sack of silver that still glitters the same way it always did. And just like that, your pulse remembers what it used to do. There are legends of assassins who disappeared into the woods, never to be seen again. Historians say they likely died of exposure or boredom, but others believe they wait, not for work, just for the world to forget them long enough to become something else. Fringe story. There's an old folk tale from the Carpathians about a man who lived in a cave and whispered people's sins back to them when they got too close. Some think it's just myth. Others think it was an assassin who'd seen too much and simply spilled. You once met a man like that, half mad, smelled like moss and roasted beetroot. He told you he used to be a silence in the night, and now he talks to trees instead of dukes. You gave him some bread. He gave you a small bone carving of a lark. You still carry it. You consider joining him sometimes, a full surrender to obscurity. But you never quite make it. Something always pulls you back. Hunger, coin, boredom, that dangerous little part of you that misses the job. Not the killing, not the fear, the purpose. Assassins don't retire because most don't know how. You've spent too long reading faces for lies, mapping exits, calculating how far your dagger will fly under stress. You don't fit in normal life anymore. You're shaped like a shadow, sharp in the wrong places, always on edge. And the worst part? You don't know who you are without the work. You've changed names so many times, you can't remember the one your mother gave you, if she gave you one. You don't tell stories about your childhood, not because you're secretive, but because the memories feel like they belong to someone else. So, you sit by a fire in a hut on a hill. You whittle useless shapes from wood. You count stars. You eavesdrop on birds. You watch a spider build the same web over and over and over again and wonder if she's better at sticking to a plan than you ever were. And every so often, when the wind shifts and the moon is just right, you get that itch again. The one that says, you know how to vanish, you know how to move, you could do one more job. You stare at the dagger under your pillow, still sharp, always sharp. You sigh, not tonight, but maybe tomorrow. You sit at the edge of a crumbling wall high above a river that's forgotten it was once important. The sky's the color of old parchment. Below, the town moves like it always has. Slow carts, barking dogs, bells that don't quite agree on the hour. It's quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. And you realize, with a long, aching breath, that you're tired. Not tired like, I need a nap. Tired like, I've been carrying a bag of ghosts for too many years, and I don't remember what it felt like before I picked it up. Why did you become an assassin? Doesn't matter now. You did. And you were good, maybe too good. You survived the plague years, the palace purges, the raids, the betrayals. You walked away from burning towers and noblemen's secrets and the screams of people who realized too late that you weren't just a shadow in the hallway. You were the shadow. But now, the work is drying up. Either your name carries too much baggage, or the world is changing. Swords are becoming symbols. Assassination's not fashionable anymore. It's uncouth. Nobles settle scores with bribes and marriages, not blades. And besides, you're slower. You notice it when you run, when you fight, when you stare at a target and ask, "Is this worth it?" and wait too long to answer. You think about legacy, not in the grand statue in the square sense, just what they'll say, what they'll remember. Will they even know? You've left no children, no students. You never passed along your methods. You never trusted anyone that much. And in your line of work, trust gets you killed faster than steel. There are whispers, sure, tales in taverns, a hooded figure in the rafters, a coin left on a noble's tongue, but they'll forget. Stories always drift from truth to myth to punchline, and maybe that's okay. Fringe detail. There's a crumbling tomb in the hills of Provence, marked only with a dagger and the phrase, "No name, no fame, no fear." Locals think it belonged to a thief. You've always suspected otherwise. You stare at your hands. They've held so many tools, knives, bottles, ropes, ledgers of death. They've dug graves, lit candles, reached out, and then pulled back at the last second. They're still. Finally. Maybe you should have left the life years ago. Maybe you couldn't. Some people are born with soft hands and futures written in ink. Others are born with calluses and paths made of footsteps no one's supposed to follow. And if you disappear now, what changes? Maybe nothing. Maybe that's the point. You think of the ones who didn't make it, the loud ones, the careful ones, the ones who got greedy or just unlucky. You say their names quietly, like coins dropped into a fountain that no longer grants wishes. You let yourself remember, just for a moment, and then you pick up your cloak, you fold the knife, not because you need it, but because it feels right. You walk down the hill, not to vanish, not to strike, just to walk, because maybe, for once, that's enough. The air cools as the path winds into a patch of trees, their leaves whispering with the weight of wind and age. You move slower now, not in fear, not in caution, but in quiet contentment. For the first time in years, there's nowhere urgent to be. The birds sing low, rhythmic songs in the canopy. A stream gurgles softly to the left. Somewhere nearby, someone is tending a fire, their smoke curling into the dusk like a lullaby. Your footsteps soften. No more city gates to slip through, no guards to bribe, no coded messages scratched into tavern walls. The world keeps spinning, and for once, you are not racing it. You come to rest beside a fallen log, moss-covered, peaceful. You sit. You breathe in the damp, honest smell of earth. You close your eyes, not from exhaustion, but from permission. And the wind moves through your hair like a friend who never forgot you. Let this moment stretch. Let the silence deepen. All the names you used, all the secrets you kept, they've faded like footprints in dew. And now you are still. You've told your story. The blade is sheathed. The breath is slow. The night is kind. You are safe. You are done. Sleep well, quiet one.